it's a good time to start off. We are at 7:05, and with all of your permission, I would like to start off today's session. As you all know and have seen from the poster, we have assembled here to listen to Dharani Dhulipalla speak about breaking the stereotypes about women in Mahabharata. We will start our program with a prayer as we do with all auspicious events. So I invite the moderators to please start the prayer.
Dhyayamo Tejomayim Naishtikim Snigdhapangavilokinim Bhagavatim Mandasmita Srimukhim Valsalyamritavarshiniim Sumadhuram Sankirtanalapinim Shyamangim Madhusiddhasuktim Amritanandatmikameeshwarim Amritanandatmikameeshwarim Amritanandatmikameeshwarim.
Pranam to everyone assembled again. Thank you for gathering here for the first ever episode of Sanjayah Uvacha. Sanjayah Uvacha is a platform created by Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetam's students and alumni to discuss Itihasaas, Puranas and other issues related to our culture, spirituality and our glorious history. And at the start of the new calendar year, the start of the new business year, we are starting off the first episode. Generally, for all of us, we celebrate a new year only when either Ugadi or Vishu or any of our traditional new years come in. And the start of the calendar year is usually uneventful for all of us. But since we are living in this world where we have accepted a lot of those colonial constructs in our daily life, what better way to start something like a calendar year by discussing our Itihasaas and especially the topic at hand, which Dharani herself has chosen, about the women in Mahabharata and breaking stereotypes. Mahabharata, our Itihasaas, Puranas, and all our texts are living and breathing truths for all of us believers. But the external world and the people who watch it, the people who study it, look at our texts and Itihasaas and Puranas oftentimes as just stories or literature or just narratives or poems. And our culture is something that has never stoned anyone to death for taking creative liberties. And that is the reason why probably at every corner of the country, there is an interpretation, there is folklore, there is an intermingling of a lot of local thoughts into our Itihasaas and Puranas, and people have absorbed it into their own. But there is also a part of the world which critically analyzes these Itihasaas from their lens or their morality, their moral lenses, which have been honed by probably years, decades, and centuries of colonialization. So those Victorian moral mores and those kind of values have crept in and have taken root in many people's minds, and that is the lens through which people interpret Mahabharata and Itihasaas and Ramayana, etc. And I'm very glad and I'm very proud to see that the younger generation is coming forward to debunk or dismantle that narrative, that looking at our Itihasaas from a Western lens, and to bring us back into the original narrative that Maharshi Vedavyasa has put forward. They say, as we in home construction parlances, they say that if you are constructing a home in a place where the ground is not stable, then the structural intelligence is to dig your pilings deeper and to have your pillars and footings go deeper and deeper into the earth. We are living in a world which is like quicksand now. There is an influx of information, there is an influx of narrative, there is a silent war going on for our minds, for our pockets, for our lives. So in this quicksand, when we live in, I think the pillars and the footings that go deep have to go deep enough to touch what the golden knowledge that our ancestors have left for us, and the timeless classics have been retold over the years. I think in my generation, they were retold in homes in the course of our lives, but I think we have become so fast paced that we have lost touch. And the today's talk is more special to me, and as a curator, of course, but as a person who follows these kind of discussions very closely and very personally, it is very special to me because Dharani is following the critical edition, and she wants to look at it from only that perspective, and her opinion has not been colored by the serials, the stories, the Amar Chitra Kathas, and those interpretations that have come in, and she has tried to stay true to the original words of Maharshi Vedavyasa. Viewing women in Itihasa from this colonial perspective has made the words of Pativratya or Pavitrata or chastity or any of those words that are traditionally associated with Hindu women, which are counted as qualities, any sacrifices that they have made for their families or for their better halves or for their children, all of those are viewed as something that they have done under some kind of a yoke or a pressure. Whereas I think our Itihasas have always told us that all events of every Itihasa has been set off by women. They have been protagonists, not the background players. They are not standing behind the door and peeping at the happenings that are in the Itihasas. They have been active participants. They have in fact been the nimitta, what we call, for most of the events that unfold. So bringing the women back into the centerfold of the narrative, I think Dharani is going to do a commendable job about it, and it's my responsibility to introduce her. Dharani Dhulipalla is an engineering student, and is in her third year of engineering, and has taken up, based on her own personal interest, not out of any pressure, which is refreshing to me, of her own personal interest to study into our Itihasas, and she has been doing this. She has been associated with the Amrita campus and the team for over a year, and I welcome Dharani, and I want to, at the beginning of this itself, I want to convey my deepest admiration to her for starting this endeavor so young in life. Mostly the Itihasas, Puranas and Bhagavata, etc. are usually the forte of people of my age group, because it is a discussion that happens in my group, and generally the people of my age are the ones who are looking at Itihasas and Puranas, and I'm really proud and happy that Dharani is taking this effort so young and has got the confidence to say that, look, I have understood and I have studied it enough so that I can start imparting my knowledge and to others. So I welcome Dharani to the center stage, and I wish her all the best, and I wish Sanjayah Uvacha all success in its future episodes. Dharani, on to you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for your kind words. So, Namashivaya and Namaste to one and all present here. Thank you so much for coming. So, good evening. It's a great pleasure to address a vast topic of concern to you all in our current gathering. The topic of concord is as relevant as the present situation and ill-fated manifestation of supreme power, Shakti, the woman. We shall start with the sloka by Kalidasa in his Raghuvamsa Kavya. Vagartaiva samproktau Vagarta pratipataye Jagatta pitarau vande Parvati Parameshwarau. We all know that the meanings of words and the words go hand in hand. So that means a literal expression without a proper meaning and a thought or feel without a proper expression becomes incomplete. In the same way, a man is incomplete without a woman, and a woman is incomplete without a man. This is how we perceive the equal contribution of men and women, the importance of togetherness in men and women. Now, I have a question here. Are we learning the actual history of women of the greatest and oldest civilization on this planet? And how are they regarded as women? I don't think so. It's a no from my side. Most of us are deprived of the actual accounts and ending up going through the narratives that were built to match us, make us in line with the theories and context of the cults of monotheistic books and their principles. Indians have a culture of praising the beauty and elegance of women. We can find precise info by going to our Itihasas, which show us how we regarded women during those times. So, first, let's look at what Itihasa is. Our view of Itihasa, which is often misconceptualized as history, is captured by the following shloka. Dharmartha kama mokshanam upadesha samanvitam purvavrittam kadhayuktam itihasam prayakshati. Only such an account of the past, which has the interest of a tale and also bears in it such teachings which assist a man in attaining righteousness, wealth, desire, and moksha, are worthy to be termed history. Time in Itihasa is not an arrow moving towards a pre-imagined goal, but directionless or cyclical, and does not lend itself to political manipulation. Itihasa does not obsess over literal facts. It does not believe that whatever is not a part of history is false. It does not feel it necessary to validate its narrative by calling it scientific. It uses a blend of fact and some fancy narrations to empower the individual in his pursuit of the four Purusharthas. To sum it up, Itihasa makes meaning and historicism destroys it. As we said, the regarding of history as historicism and the regarding of history as Itihasa, and the twain shall never meet. Now, let me introduce you all to one of the greatest characters of Mahabharata, Kunti Mata. While modern India, Scandinavian countries, and countries like USA and European countries are facing issues related to gender bias, gender inequality, and female feticide, it is very interesting to note that Indian women have played a very important role, indeed to say a dominant role even from ancient India till date. Today, we shall have a quick reflection of the character Kunti from our great epic Mahabharata. Surasena, the grandfather of Sri Krishna, was a worthy scion of the Yadava race. His daughter Pritha was virtuous, good-natured, selfless, and an ideal devotee since her childhood. Since Sura's cousin Kunti Boja was childless, Sura gave his daughter Pritha in adoption to him. From that time, she was known by the name of Kunti after her adoptive father. When Kunti was a little girl, sage Durvasa stayed for a time as a guest in her father's house, and she served the sage for a year with all care, patience, and devotion. Being extremely pleased by all the comforts, patience, and devotion offered by Kunti, Durvasa Maharshi offered her a mantra that would invoke any deva of her choice and would bless her with children. Out of impetuous curiosity and impatience, Kunti invoked Surya Deva and begot the child, Karna. He was born with sacred armor. This was an act by Kunti during an unfortunate moment, the cause of many tragedies in her life due to lack of faith in a Mahatma's words. Out of the fear of her chastity getting defamed, Kunti placed the child in a sealed box and set it afloat in a river. A childless charioteer, Adhiratha and Radha, they happened to see the floating case, and thus the son of Surya Deva, who is Karna, came to be brought up as Sutaputra. Kunti got married to King Pandu, but due to the curse by sage Kindama, a remorseful Pandu renounced the kingdom and went into exile with his wives Kunti and Madri. Since the couple were childless, Kunti used the boon granted to her by sage Durvasa to bear three sons, Yudhishthira by Dharmaraja, Yamadharmaraja, Bhima by Vayudeva, and Arjuna by Indradeva. Kunti was a magnanimous and compassionate woman. She understood her co-wife's pain and also her inhibition to personally approach her for favor. She invoked Ashwini Devatas for Madri on her behest, and thus Madri gave birth to twin sons, Nakula and Sahadeva. But as a result of Kindama's curse, after the death of Pandu and Madri, Kunti was the one who took care of all 5 children, taking them back to Hastinapura. She was impartial between her sons and that of Madri's. In fact, Sahadeva was her favorite son. Also, the love showed by Kunti on these twins ensured that they never missed their own mother. Dhritarashtra's son Kauravas never liked them. So, during their childhood, Duryodhana, the eldest of Kauravas, poisoned and tried to kill Bhima, but he was saved. Kunti got hurt by this incident but maintained her calmness and instructed Bhima to be more cautious and vigilant, which made Bhima to maintain his awareness against all setbacks throughout his life. Kunti was strong, insightful, and a woman of indiscrimination who always enhanced the courage of her children during difficult periods of their life. After escaping from Wax Palace attack, they moved to hideout. On the way, Bhima slays the Rakshasa Hidimba and he is besieged by Hidimbi, Hidimba's sister, to wed her. Bhima is reluctant, but it was Kunti who ordered Bhima to marry Hidimbi, seeing the merit, the real beauty in a woman, not getting carried away by mere external appearance. It was Hidimbi who gave birth to Ghatotkacha, who later took part in the Kurukshetra war and saved life of Arjuna in the war by accepting the Shakti weapon aimed by Karna. During their stay at Ekachakrapura, Kunti and the Pandavas came to know about a demon whose name was Bakasura, who actually ate people. So the villagers had to send one member of their family and food to Bakasura, who would devour both. When Kunti heard the cries of a Brahmin who had provided her and her sons a shelter in Ekachakra, Kunti consoled him and suggested that instead of the Brahmin's family, her son Bhima would face the demon. Kunti engineered a plot where Bhima would be able to face and kill the demon. The powerful Bhima brought his might to fore and defeated Bakasura. This shows compassion, sense of gratefulness, shrewdness, and a good mother who always taught noble values and good conduct to her children. Kunti constantly guides her sons on their actions and keeps the family bound as one, and they never have fights among each other. Kunti always understood Draupadi, the wife of Pandavas, and gave constant support to Draupadi during the tough times of her life. Kunti had great amount of respect to her elders and served them with her whole being. This was clearly visible in her actions towards her brother-in-law Dhritarashtra, Gandhari, and Vidura. On the advice of Bhishma, Pandavas were given land to rule, which was later called Indraprastha, after their return to Hastinapura from Panchala. However, Kunti remained in Hastinapura with her sister-in-law Gandhari, which highlights her dutiful attitude towards her elders. When the Pandavas lose the kingdom in a dice game and are forced to go into exile for 13 years, Kunti is forced by King Dhritarashtra to remain in the capital. She chose to stay in Vidura's house rather than the royal palace. This shows the virtue of Kunti not being attached to worldly comforts and pleasures. Despite supporting her children, Kunti stayed in the Kaurava camp along with Gandhari. After the Kurukshetra war, Kunti lived with her sons for many years. After she felt that the time has come for her Vanaprastha period of life, she moved to a forest near the Himalayas with Vidura, Dhritarashtra, and Gandhari, and later all 4 of them perished in a forest fire, attaining higher life. To summarize in simple words, Kunti can be portrayed as a devoted and an impulsive young girl, a faithful consort, a dutiful and a shrewd mother, a doting and a fair mother-in-law. Ultimately, she was a righteous and sacrificing woman. Now, let's look at another great character of Mahabharata who is known for standing up against the evil, who suffered many losses and still standing for the righteous and justice with courage, strength, and will. Yes, you're correct. It's none other than Draupadi, the epitome of braveness, courage, beauty, patience, and intelligence, who is also known as Panchali since she belongs to the Panchala kingdom. She is also known as Krishna due to her dark complexion. Draupadi is the daughter of King Drupada. Drupada was defeated by Arjuna on behalf of Drona, who subsequently took half his kingdom to humiliate him. To gain revenge on Drona, he performed a great sacrifice to beget a powerful son who could kill him. Having been struck by Arjuna's valor, Drupada also prayed at the sacrifice for an exceptionally beautiful daughter to give to him. As a token of his appreciation, Draupadi thus emerged with Drishtadyumna from the sacrificial fire. King Drupada arranged a special task for all the kings and princes of different kingdoms who came to participate in the Swayamvara of Draupadi. The princes vying for Draupadi's hand had to solve the Matsya Yantra by shooting a maximum of 5 arrows at a revolving fish, while looking only at its reflection in a bowl below it. Drupada was confident that Arjuna alone could accomplish this task. Arriving with his brothers disguised as Brahmins, Arjuna successfully tackles the target. While in exile, all Pandavas usually say, "Look, mother, I'm back home with Bhiksha." Kunti, the mother of Pandavas, often advised her sons that they share everything they have or obtain through Bhiksha, equally amongst themselves. Upon returning home with Draupadi, Arjuna addresses his mother first. "Look, mother, I'm back home." Kunti, unmindful of what Arjuna had wrought, unassumingly asked her son to share whatever it is with his brothers. Thus, in order to obey their mother's order, all 5 brothers accepted Draupadi as their wife. There is a mention of one polantry in critical edition of Mahabharata, where Maharshi Vedavyasa tells that incident to Pandavas after their marriage. It is also said that when Maharshi Vyasa visits the family, he explains to Draupadi that her unique position as the wife of 5 brothers results from a certain incident in her previous birth. She had in that lifetime prayed to Lord Shiva to grant a boon to marry a person with 5 desired qualities. Lord Shiva, pleased with her devotion, tells her that it is very difficult to get a husband with all 5 qualities that she desired. But she sticks to her ground and asks for the same again. Then Lord Shiva grants her wish, saying that she would get the same in her next birth. Hence, she gets married to 5 brothers, each who represent a desired quality of her. We all know what happened in the Juda Sabha, and its consequences led to the greatest humiliation in the life of Draupadi. In fact, any woman would not never like to face such a situation in their whole life. No one would ever will to get their chastity worn off, that too in front of everyone. But in those days itself, Draupadi faced such an agony in her life. Duryodhana commands his younger brother Dushasana to forcefully bring her into the forum after defeating Yudhishthira in the game of dice. Dushasana barges into the living quarters of Draupadi and grabs her and brings her into the court, dragging her by the hair. To the horror of everybody present, Dushasana proceeds to strip Draupadi of her sari. Seeing her husbands unable or unwilling to help her, Draupadi prays to Lord Krishna to protect her modesty. Lord Krishna now works a miracle so that as Dushasana unwraps layers and layers of her sari keeps getting extended. Finally, a tired Dushasana backs off without being able to strip Draupadi. Draupadi's tear haran, a definitive moment in the story of Mahabharata. Seeing Draupadi being violated so brazenly, Bhima, in a roaring rage, goes to tear open Dushasana's torso one day and drink his blood. Duryodhana, with the advice of Karna, bears and pats his thigh, looking into Draupadi, implying her to sit on his thigh. In impotent rage, Bhima vows in front of the entire assembly that one day he will break that very thigh of Duryodhana in a battle. Arjuna vows to kill Karna for insulting Draupadi. Finally, the blind monarch Dhritarashtra's conscience is stirred, in part fearing the wrath of Pandavas against his sons. He intervenes and asks Draupadi to wish for whatever she desires. Draupadi asks her husbands, the Pandavas, to be freed from slavery. Dhritarashtra grants her wish and also restores to Pandavas all they lost in the game of dice. Even though, after knowing that she will lose everything in the mighty war, Draupadi accepting all the results that would come in the future and asks the Pandavas to fight and defeat the Kauravas to protect and establish Dharma. Her drive and will to stand up for herself and Dharma, even after all the diversities, makes her an ideal model for the new age where women are harassed, insulted, downtrodden, abused by many evil minded people. Let's look at another great character of Mahabharata, Madri. Matri is a role where very less attention has been paid by us in Mahabharata. Usually, we can see most of the Mahabharata discussions would never have any mention of Madri. Yet, she played a very prominent role and had more significance in terms of impact and story progression. She is the second wife of Pandu and is more remembered as the beloved wife of Pandu than the mother of the Pandava twins Nakula and Sahadeva. She is the sister of Shalya and was introduced by Vyasa with the epithet Rupena Sadrishi, which means famous for her unparalleled beauty. Madri was brought by Bhishma for Pandu, and she was famous on earth for her beauty. Madri was always quite boasted up about her beauty, whilst that of Kunti's. She always thought that Pandu Maharaja loved her more than Kunti, which made her show her superiority over Kunti. The death of Pandu finally made Madri realize the large-hearted nature of Kunti. She chose to leave her twins under her sister's love and affection while she followed Pandu to eternity. She knew she won't be able to treat Kunti's sons without partiality. She honestly admitted the fact before Kunti and entrusted her sons to her wholeheartedly. The death of Panduraja brought extreme mental disturbance amongst both Kunti and Madri. Kunti regretted about not being with Pandu during his last moments. She immediately decided to follow Pandu Maharaja to the deathbed, but Madri stopped her. And then Madri finally admitted in front of her sister about the reason of her beloved husband's death. At that instant of time, Madri finally made sure that it was Kunti who will be taking care of her sons, along with uh, Dharmaraja, Bhima, and Arjuna. Madri thus got enlightened and accepted Kunti's motherhood as much superior to hers. She allowed the world to treat Kunti as the mother of 5 and not of 3. Madri was less remembered as the mother of twins, but more acknowledged as the beloved wife of Pandu Maharaja. She took time to realize how generous Kunti was, but at last she did realize. She relinquished her motherly status to Kunti and followed her loving husband in his last journey. She stands out in her own way as the beautiful Madra princess loved passionately by King Pandu till his last breath. Now, let's look at another prominent character from our Mahabharata Itihasa, Gandhari. Gandhari was a stubborn young woman, a faithful wife, a determined mother, and upon all of these, she was a righteous woman. Gandhari was the princess of Gandhara Desa and a reincarnation of Mati, the goddess of intelligence. Gandhara was a subordinate kingdom to Bharata, bordered by the Hindu Kush in the north, Kabul and Gumal tributaries of the Indus River system to the east and west. She was engaged to be married to Dhritarashtra, the eldest prince of Hastinapura. While Shakuni, her brother, was not pleased at the prospect of her sister being married to a blind prince who would not even be considered as the heir to the throne, the beautiful princess had her own notions of respect and loyalty to her future husband, and when she came to know that he was blind by birth, she took a vow to blindfold herself for the rest of her life in order to show her empathy to him. While her action is actually a noble intent, many would argue that she would have been more useful to Dhritarashtra if she had chosen to be his eyes instead of a blind companion. But this act of Gandhari shows us her love and compassion that she possessed towards Dhritarashtra. Gandhari's life could not have been easy by being married to a blind, insecure, and depressed prince. On top of that, Gandhari's only hope of ever getting her due by producing an heir to the throne was not materializing as per plans. With Pandu, Kunti, and Madri in the forest, Gandhari and her husband wanted to have a son who would be the eldest of the Kuru princes and thus eligible to become the king of Hastinapura. However, she had a prolonged pregnancy, and in the meantime, Kunti and Madri begot sons, the Pandavas. This event made Gandhari so upset that she herself injured her womb with utmost pain. This resulted in a lifeless ball of flesh which fell out of her womb that was later divided by Vyasa into 101 pieces and incubated in pots of ghee for 18 months to produce the 100 Kauravas and their sister Dushala. Gandhari was a righteous woman who, despite knowing that her sons were weaker than Pandavas and may not even get the chance to rule the kingdom, she never actively encouraged them to rile the Pandava brothers. On the contrary, she was wary of Duryodhana's constant endeavor to create trouble for Pandavas and hatched plots, along with his uncle Shakuni, to kill them. But her efforts to teach the right values to her sons were all in vain, and she was well aware of her failure and pursued it. The fact that she stuck to the value of righteousness is evident from the blessing that she gave her son Duryodhana before and during the Great War. Knowing well that Dharma was on the side of Pandavas, she always told Duryodhana, Yato dharmas tato jayaha, which means victory shall be with those who are righteous. This was the last hoping act of Gandhari. She thought that hearing these words multiple times would signal Duryodhana that his mother was trying to convey him about his path that he was walking on, nothing but his adharma. This does not take away anything from Gandhari, the mother who opened her blindfold just once in her life to bestow a naked Duryodhana with an iron body that could not be destroyed by any weapon. While on one hand, she tried to save Duryodhana by giving her sound advice to call off the war and give half of the kingdom to the Pandavas, and later by protecting him from harm through her powers. On the other, she stayed true to herself and her righteous nature by wishing the victory for those who fought for truth. Even after the war, she forgave the Pandavas for killing her sons as she knew that they had tried their best to avoid the war. And Duryodhana had tempted fate by insulting Krishna when he came to Hastinapura as an emissary of Pandavas. Till now, we've discussed about 4 prominent female characters of our Mahabharata, namely Kunti, Madri, Gandhari, and Draupadi. But apart from these characters, there are some characters who might not be as famous as these, but have played a prominent role in the lives of people in Mahabharata. Some of them are Subhadra, Vrishali, Hidimba, Shakuntala, and many more. The common quality of all these women is that they were very strong. They were bold enough and have courageously faced all challenges that occurred in their path. They never gave up hope and faced all the situations that came in the journey of their life decisively. Hidimba was the sister of a demon named Hidimbi and also the wife of our brave Pandava brother Bhimasena. Both Hidimba and Bhima were together only for a year, but yet she was never sad for being away from her husband. Instead, she went on a tapasya for so many years in order to become a goddess. In fact, there's a temple where Hidimba is worshipped in Manali during Navaratri. Also, we all know about the story of Dushantha and Shakuntala. Dushyanta forgets Shakuntala because of the shapa that was given by Durvasa Maharshi. As a result of the shapa, Dushyanta forgets Shakuntala and does not send anyone to Shakuntala's place to bring her to the kingdom for a span of 6 years. When Shakuntala goes to the kingdom also, Dushyanta fails to realize who she is and asks her to go out of the kingdom. But when he sees the ring that he has given as a token of their love, he recollects everything and accepts both his wife and son. But in all these tough situations of Shakuntala's life, Shakuntala never lost hope or faith. She was very patient and was trying in different manners to reach out to the king. We are all aware that Vrishali is the wife of Karna and also the sister of Satyasena, the charioteer of Duryodhana. Karna was involved in many adharmic activities unknowingly as he was the beloved friend of Duryodhana. But it is said that most of the times it is Vrishali's Punyaphala that had saved Karna from facing or going through many obstacles. Vrishali was also referred by Gandhari in the Stri Parva as a brave woman, and Duryodhana praises Vrishali as an extraordinary woman. Now it's Subhadra, the wife of Partha and the beloved sister of Balarama and Sri Krishna. She too came across many challenges in life, but she faced all of them with a brave heart and patience. She was the person who looked after all the Pandava children while the Pandavas, along with Draupadi, went on Vanavasa. During the same Vanavasa time, she faced criticism from Balarama and Krishna, although Krishna was only pretending. She had to leave from Dwarka too. It is believed that Subhadra is a goddess named Yogamaya. She is worshipped at the Jagannatha temple in Puri. She is also worshipped by some communities in states like Gujarat, West Bengal, Orissa, and also in Bangladesh. It is also said that the same Yogamaya was in the form of a demoness named Trijata, who we came across in Ramayana in her previous life to assist in the difficulties that Sita Devi would face during her stay at Ashokavana. She was so good that Rama gave her a boon to be born as a sister of Sri Krishna. Now, let's look at some of the slokas that are so much imbibed into our culture. Yatra naryastu pujyante ramante tatra devataha. Wherever women are respected, divinity blossoms there. Nasti stri samachaya, nasti stri samagatihi, nasti stri samantranam, nasti stri samamprapa. Dashaputra samakanta, dashaputra pravarthya, yatphalam labate matsya, stalabhyam kantaya kaya. Nowadays, there are many people who do not realize the greatness of our Itihasas and often get the question of why are our Itihasas important? Personally, I feel that a single answer cannot be given to this question because there are humongous number of answers. But to begin with, our Itihasas, namely the stories of Ramayana and Mahabharata, are in the blood of our people. Today, not many people are aware of our Itihasas, but the situation was not like this about a few decades ago. I can strongly say that India is known worldwide for the greatness of our Itihasas, rich culture, traditions, and many more. In fact, in the olden days, Rajas made gifts of land to learned men to give year-round discourses on the Mahabharata in the temples. Also, the learnings of Ramayana and Mahabharata are steeped deep inside the veins of our previous generations. In teachings of Sankara, Buddha, Mahavira, they all can be seen flourishing along with other dharmic way of life in all Indian kingdoms. Even the Bahadurs and Zamindars continued this later on. Most of the art forms and literature in and around the Indian subcontinent were deeply influenced by the Itihasas. These were all developed to help people understand the meaning of Itihasa according to their regional customs. Even most of the village folklores were shaped by our Itihasas. People used to gather and discuss about our Itihasas. There were many people like Haridas and Acharyas who used to organize samvadas and discussions about our Itihasas. But have you all ever thought of why Itihasas are so much penetrated within us? This is because the purpose of Itihasa is to explain the subtle philosophy of karma to help one not to deviate from the path of dharma and transcend the ocean of samsara, ultimately to attain moksha. This constantly kept our people very simple, sincere, truthful, honest, motivated, and of course, devoted to. The teachings of our Itihasas were ingested very much into everyone's hearts, and that made everyone be dutiful to their responsibilities. The way we have to treat our elders, women, and everyone else who we meet can also be learned from our Itihasas. In our closing note, what our plea to the audience is to learn more about the richness of our culture and also to start imbibing the knowledge of our great Itihasas into your lives too, so that it can bring up a huge change in our perspectives. We all know that these days, many of us are doing different tasks associated with different kinds of fields. Now, this has become the most important thing these days. In educational world, these are often referred as multidisciplinary courses. The government of India is also giving a lot of prominence to Indian heritage. This is where Amrita University steps in. Mahabharata, Ramayana, Gita, etc. are taught. There are many multidisciplinary courses that Amrita provides, which help the students to learn about various aspects of education and the motto of inclusive learning, which makes it easier to choose diagonal paths in pursuing careers. Amrita University is guided by its chancellor, Sri Mata Amritanandamayi Devi, commonly known as Amma. Amma is a world-renowned spiritual leader who constantly keeps everyone motivated and also spreads her unconditional love and compassion to every being. Thank you, one and all. Namaskar.
Thank you, Dharani. That's almost 30 minutes of a retelling, probably a relook at Mahabharata from its original perspective. I'm very glad that we are discussing these characters. I think there are much more in Mahabharata, to start from Satyavati to Ganga Devi to Amba Ambalika and all the women of Mahabharata. There is a word that can define all of them, and that is a word that I wish our contemporary women would live by. They were all strong women. They were women who, when faced with a lot of difficulties, a lot of untoward events in their lives, not in their control, they did not go searching for excuses. They did not go searching for philosophies that will help them escape their duties. I think Dharani, through the 30 minutes, has used the word duty, responsibility, honor, all those words repeatedly. I think those are the values that all men and women of both the Puranas and the current age are bound to live by, because we are supposed to be in pursuit of moksha. We are supposed to live a life of dharma. And in our dharma, I think our duties have always been, I think, eons above our rights. As a Hindu, that's something that I repeat in all the avenues that I get, that the defining element that sets apart a Hindu dharmika from others is that we embrace our responsibilities and our duties. We do not find excuses to escape from it. We do not hide behind our rights. There could be a lot of rights defined in law. There were rights given to women in those eras also, but none of these women used those excuses to stay back from any of their duties, despite the circumstances around them being so wild. The people around them putting them into situations where they had to probably struggle to come out of. So I think to look at these women in detail about their circumstances, what caused their reactions, what were the events, a relook into those, and then to admire that these are the women that we are taught about, these are the women that we emulate. And as me, as an individual, in every given situation, I will have a Kunti, a Madri, a Gandhari, a Shakuntala, everybody I will play those roles at some point in my life. And I have been given live examples through these Itihasaas, and to help me navigate. It's sort of like a manual, a user manual for life, where there have been examples given to us to live by. So thank you, Dharani, for a very detailed retelling of many of these women's life. And I hope you take it forward, and that, like I said, there are Satyavati, who is probably the start of it all. Mata Ganga, who refused to accept or less than what she deserved. Amba Ambalika and Ambika, who set off a lot of events of Mahabharata. So I think we need to slowly start looking at all those characters also, and probably address them from a modern perspective at some point. Princess Ulupi, Princess Chintrangada, all of those women have always fascinated everyone. And I think it is time that our younger generation embraces all these women, because there are no better examples to live by. The modern psychologists, philosophers, ancient philosophers of other countries have all said that life has the tendency to throw challenges at us. And it's those that fight, those that stay and fight with their team, are the ones that succeed in coming out of those challenges and take their culture and generations forward. So really a heartfelt appreciation to Dharani for the detailed retelling of these stories. And I hope you will keep it up, and I hope you will cover more of the women of Mahabharata. Now, in our format, we have some more time. So I would welcome questions from the audience. I would like you to raise your hands if you have questions. Before that, it is one of the people I personally admire a lot, Dr. Vishwa Adluri sir, I think is there in our audiences. So if he is still here, I would really love it if he could add a few words and contribute to the discussion. If you don't mind, sir, I would really love to invite you to say a few words. The others, I request you to keep your questions ready. Raise your hand so that the moderators can allow you to ask your questions. So if you're here, Vishwa Adluri, sir, can you please come in? I'll just see if I can.
Namaste, Padmaji. Namaste, Dharani. It is indeed an honor to wake up. It is early morning here in New York, but I made it a point to start my new year by sharing the greatest story ever told, Mahabharata, which has captured me, and I work on this for the last 25 years. The paper was excellent. We can easily multiply the depth of Dharaniji's already deep understanding by simply looking at places where the question of Pativrata comes up. One of the places where the question of Pativrata comes up is in the Virata Parvan, when Draupadi is unable to be protected against Kichaka. So Bhima, when she goes to Bhimasena for help, Bhimasena says, "Oh, look, there were so many Pativratas. You should also be a Pativrata." So the question of Pativrata is presented by Vyasa there as a critique of Manu and Purusha Dharma on part of the husband. The question of the Pativrata even comes to the fore when the man has already failed or cannot, is helpless to do his duties as a man. So it shows that although men have a certain position in society and a certain responsibility, the question of Pativrata is not just a glorification of women, but also a critique of, or an exploration into the conditions of failure of, let's say, male dharma, Purusha dharma. And I have only, I found in the whole paper only one thing, that Dushala is not married to Karna, Dushala is married to Jayadratha. That is just one point. And maybe we should not translate Draupadi's sari as a sari, but as an ekavastram, because as you know, there is a lot of, there are some crazy people out there who contest this, and the contest goes so far as to imply that Draupadi was never disrobed, which would seriously impair the dramatic delivery of the story. So it's not your fault at all, Dharaniji, but please try to think of it as ekavastram. I understand our need to look at Draupadi and all these characters in a good light. In fact, except for Kadru, there are no bad women in the Mahabharata. Like, nowhere do we find an unsympathetic, a woman who does not evoke some sense of our respect and wonder. Even someone who is so badly behaved as Devayani in the art. But having said that, the Mahabharata is not just a register of this is dharma, do these things, this is adharma, don't do these things. That would be too simplistic. Mahabharata always teaches dharma through dharma samshaya. There is a doubt about dharma. Dharma samvada. There is a debate about dharma. And only then there is the dharma is interpreted according to every given situation, which prevents dharma from becoming fundamentalist. So by raising questions, the Mahabharata keeps us thinking. So in the case of Gandhari, is she really a good wife? If you bind yourself to show your love. We can think about it one way. Yes, of course, she's trying to. But another way is, as Dharani pointed out, and I was very happy to hear it, some people will say that's the worst thing she could have done. Maybe she thought when she was being summoned earlier by Bhishma summons her, right? When Bhishma summons her, Bhishma says that she has a boon that she will have 100 sons. She might have thought Bhishma is going to marry her. Instead, she got stuck with this blind fellow. Maybe she was angry and she said, I refuse to be the handmaiden for this person. Or she could have, and surely inducing an abortion by striking your womb against a pillar out of something like jealousy towards a Kunti, who's not even a co-wife, right? For the sake of having the older son, for the sake of inheritance, kind of shows that she's not that different from Dhritarashtra and not that different from Duryodhana. In fact, when she sees that things are going out of control, she will quickly come and say, hey, for example, in the Sabha, she basically puts out the fire. Now, I'm not saying Draupadi is a bad person, but if you look at Parashurama again, is he a bad person? Is he a good person? That complexity of character that Mahabharata gives to each of the characters makes for extraordinary storytelling. So we should just go beyond the two columns of praise of dharma and adharma, or praiseworthy or non-praiseworthy, and see how behind the characters certain traits and dharmas are working themselves over. So those were my comments, and I hope that again, it was a fantastic presentation. I hope in the presentation itself you've made notes, because to mine, I could not easily, a shloka did not come to my mind where Gandhari tells Duryodhana, yato dharma tato jaya. So if I want to go look those things up, which would be very useful for me, and I could learn and profit from that, I would like to have had a transcript of it. So if that is, please send it to me. That's all I have to say. Thank you again. Thank you. You young people are the hope of every culture.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for contributing to this. It's a wonderful surprise for us. We were not expecting this, and I think it's a blessing that you were here and you have spoken to us and you've spoken to our audience. And the fact that, flawed people, the Itihasa, I think accepting Bhagwan himself, everybody, every protagonist in the Itihasa are flawed in some way or the other. And I feel it is a lesson to us that, to what extent will you go? Will you go to the extent of Duryodhana? Will you go to the extent of Karna? Or will you, be flawed only up to the extent of probably a Yudhishthira or an Arjuna? I think striking that balance, having Bhagwan on your side, and then, fighting for Dharma is probably what we imbibe. And I think and again, this is my opinion, I always look at it as a blueprint, as something that to fall back upon in times of crisis, that, who am I at this moment, this moment where life has got me to, and who am I? And then I, try to find characters who I can relate to. But in the modern narrative, we people who are looking at our Itihasas from this point of view, we look at it as probably a lesson, a blueprint, or etc. But the modern narrative likes to paint. I saw an article in the News Minute which covered a lady's a student rewriting Kunti, Gandhari, and Draupadi, and
I also sometimes read these comments. There's somebody called Ashya Sataret in the Hindu newspaper that retells these stories, apparently from a feminine perspective, but it is actually a deconstructive and not a very bright perspective. But okay, so what? and everybody can speak.
No, but
But
it's
you
more
made
about,
a point, Padmaji, which
yes,
is that you look to Dharma and or to these characters to follow Dharma. That is very, very important for our culture. For example, what would Rama do?
yes,
So Rama Vigrahavan Dharma. So there is one way in which we are taught Dharma by using paradigm. But I also think in the Mahabharata, Dharma is taught by using uh, debates on Dharma, Dharma Samvada. In fact, Gita is Dharma Samvada. Arjuna is not saying, I'm going to do adharma. He's
yes,
saying, my Kshatriya Dharma is this, my Kula Dharma is this. There are two perfectly good dharmas for me to follow. Which one should I follow? So the Dharma Samvada is that logic of Dharma, the debate about Dharma is craftily created by Vyasa Mahamuni. So it is not really clear as this is good, this is bad, which is what helps us imbibe our dharmic teaching in a nuanced way. So we don't become fundamentalists. We don't say this is the law and then
no,
we
absolutely,
always, there is another dharma that questions it and makes us thoughtful. And once we become thoughtful, we become ethical.
yes, true, so true. Thank you again, sir. Thank you. Shall I, with your permission, I'll open the floor
No,
to
no,
the
please,
yeah, to the audience for questions. I can see Mr. Mandeep Mittal has raised his hand for a question, and can we take those questions? And I request the moderators to allow them to switch on their mics or whatever. And I think there are a few people who have given questions in chats. I request you to ask those questions. We'll spare another 20 minutes for questions. So I really request you to keep the questions short. Either Dharani, me, whoever feels like answering the question, we can jump in. So please ask your questions. Thank you.
Okay. So actually, ma'am, I have three questions. Okay,
Yeah.
they are related only. So
Okay.
first is the women we talked about. They all are they all are framed into that patriarchal mindset, right? Their lives revolve around their husbands or their sons.
Okay.
Do we have any woman who says, okay, I will not marry, unmarried woman independently, who can live life independently, right? Kunti, Draupadi, Gandhari, they all are living in that template only, right? Of a good daughter, of a good daughter-in-law, then a good mother, right? Getting my point? Is there any woman who says, okay, I don't want to be mother, right? Completely independent. I think this is where today's women might want to go, right?
No. See, I would say, I'm sorry, Dharani, I'm jumping in to answer that question because I have thought about this
And
earlier.
second question, just listen all three questions.
Right.
Second is, we often hear that Arjuna or the princes, right? They are going to Gurukuls, but we do not see any example where any princess going to Gurukul. Perhaps Mata Sita might have been educated, but we don't hear much of it, right? Draupadi going to Gurukul or any of the princess or any woman going to Gurukul. So is there any reference of women education? That is second question. Now, the third question is about women's chastity, right? So Kunti was afraid that her character will be questioned, right? Once world know about. But what world says is one part, but what our shastras or what our philosophy says about it. But what were the thought of Krishna? Is there any discussion with Krishna or is there any shloka which says good or bad about it? Okay? So these are the three questions.
Okay.
And these are relevant actually. This is where today's women and today's couples or today's men are at the crossroads of thought, right?
Mandeepji, all questions are relevant, especially with respect to dharma. Like Sir said, Dharma Samvada is what has taken us this far and has allowed our civilization to survive waves and waves of attacks. So I'm sure Samvada is something that we are all interested in. So I think there are three parts of your questions. I will answer the first part first, and then Dharani can come in if she wants to. About the women, I think this answer that I'm trying to give will answer the first and the last part. Mahabharata, in my mind, is not an exact retelling of exactly every event that happened in all of their lives. I think Mahabharata is created and curated in such a way that the highlight events of the I should use the word story, the highlight events of the story were highlighted. Now, if they were to cover, or everybody who all the characters going to Gurukula, thoughts and, the anxieties of every single character, do you imagine the volume of this work at the end of the day, the volume of this work? And, it is, I don't think it is possible or it is needed to cover every single aspect of every single person who is involved. The women, of course, I feel that all the women were educated because they have been equal participants in my mind. Just that their education has not been highlighted would not say that they were not educated. They would have been educated in different fields. I think the clarity in terms of Dhanur Vidya, I am sure the women, there are characters in many of our Itihasas who have been excellent warriors. So Dhanur Vidya was also available to them, but probably they did not go to the same Gurukula as Arjuna with Drona. They must have had other education. So I have not thought about why the women's Gurukulas or the ladies' schools have not been discussed, or if there were co-educations and things like that. That question has not arisen in my mind, but I'm sure, I'm very clear that the subplots, what you call as subplots, were not developed for the reason of brevity, because already the Itihasas are quite large and there is a range of issues for men and women covered in that. And the core of it is about family. The Hindu Dharma has always been about family, and hence the family being the center of narratives. The women who are standing shoulder to shoulder with their husbands, protecting their children, imparting value to their children, etc., have always been at the center of all Hindu narratives, because we have always been about nurturing the future generation. As a Hindu, primary parts of my dharma, I believe, is my rina to my pitrus, that is my living pitrus and my departed pitrus, and my responsibilities to my next generation. So majority of the women of most times are in pursuit of this goal. And I think it is for us that these examples are being given. Now, in other spiritual narratives, we have Maitreyi, Gargi, and all those Rishikas who have, not had children, who have been married but have lived the life of brahmacharinis or brahmavadinis. So we have those ample examples in other narratives. So I don't think it is fair to search for them in Mahabharata and then find that as a lacking of it. So I think people like me, I feel that it is okay that Mahabharata addresses those women who are grahanis or those kulavadhus or all those derogatory words that feminists use today.
Or fits in the patriarchy.
Ji?
Or fits in the patriarchy template, right? Perhaps.
See, I am a married woman. Sorry, Mandeep ji, to interrupt you. I am a married woman. I am as educated as my husband, but I take it very seriously. My role as a wife and a mother is something that I take it very seriously, and it is by my choice. It is not something that somebody has. I'm not marching to a template just because the template is there. I'm marching to it because it makes sense to me, and that it fulfills me, and it gives me a certain joy and a certain fulfillment. And I connect to my ancestors. I believe that the values that they have cultivated has tested the time, has stood the test of time, and I have chosen it with my own brains. So it is not my father or my husband or the society that has told me what to do, because thankfully I was given all the education and I was given the choice of choosing, the choice of deciding what my life is going to be. So that this is where I find it very annoying when people say that women who have chosen to put their families first are somehow victims of patriarchy. It is not. Neither am I a victim of patriarchy.
It's not about that, ma'am. It's purely about Mahabharata, but Mahabharata only talks about these things. This is what my question is. I'm not saying good or bad.
If you have a story written about my life, I think many of these events will be portrayed in terms of what my son went through or things like that. And that does not necessarily make it patriarchal. That's my limit.
Okay, fine. Coming back to the first question about chastity is
chastity.
So Kunti was afraid that she will be questioned, right? Is there any reference of having her conversation with somebody where somebody would say that is okay or that is not okay?
See, that is, I think, the biggest downfall of Kunti is that she did not have a discussion. I think she would not have abandoned her children had she had a discussion with somebody, because all the wealth of knowledge that she had around her, the kind of masters that she had around her, and she did not take the option of taking that opinion or having that discussion, is what has resulted in her mistake. So I think we should look at it as the discussion about Kunti's hesitation or her doubts about what would be her life. And we should say that that is discussion enough, that she has made this such a giant, I would call it just such a giant mistake, though I'm not qualified to say that. But the whole events were set off because she did not take help. So probably we should look at it as a lesson to all the women, saying that, do not go by your ideals or thoughts about chastity. Go have discussions with 10 people and then take your decisions in life. Do not take rash decisions. See, everybody lives their life knowing all the facts, but at given moments where crisis presents itself, however intelligent you are, however well-read you are, however philosophical minded you are, there are moments where you lose your balance. And I don't think, we need to really question why there was no discussion at that point. Where
my question is what are shastras, or what are philosophy says about her actions? Not her actions, but about women's chastity.
Women and men have been asked to be chaste, right? Is not chastity. Chastity, when you say purity of character, not indulging in your sensory pleasures, is a virtue in every shastra. Virtually every shastra tells you to withdraw your indriyas and to look within and to find the strength within and to stay loyal, to stay committed. I think it is for men and women, and every single shastra has pointed out that this is a great virtue to have. Chastity in shastra, see, again we are using English words, and this is something that I find it frustrating when we use English words to define certain Indic concepts. Chastity is not just refraining from sex or having only a single partner or something like that. Chastity is a larger concept. So I think every single, for men, women, children, elders, everybody, in chastity, virya, dhairya, all those things are qualities that have been defined as ideal in every shastra. So I do not understand again. Yeah.
Fine.
Sir was raising his hand. Do you want to add anything, sir? Yeah, Vishwa sir, if you were raising your hand.
Yeah, I have several comments about the issue of rights and patriarchy and so on. And thank you, Mittalji, for bringing these up, because this is the world we live in. We live in a hybrid world of this political language of rights versus the Mahabharata, which is basically talking about duties. So dharma is understood here in the sense of duties, not in the sense of allocation of rights. So we have to be kind of compassionate in evaluating the questions with some intellectual generosity and not try to reduce one to the other. The question of rights are also important. The question of duties are also important. For according to the Mahabharata, as Padmaji said, the Grihastha Dharma is normative. And if you go further back in the Brahmanas, even the Grihastha is based on a ritual. It is a ritual life in which marriage is only a function of the man's ritual life. If he has a wife, he can perform the ritual. If he does not have wife, he cannot perform rituals. And those rituals are also meant to accumulate desire, to fulfill desires, which will be in the form of Vitta or wealth, Putra or son. See, wealth is meaningless if you do not have a son to whom you can transmit that wealth to. So don't you think the marriage of institution itself can be accused of patriarchy? So we cannot go too far with that question. And the second point I wanted to say is the difference in the overall outlook. I talked about the difference in political outlooks, but overall outlooks. The European perspective is that the world can be bettered unto a point that we would neither need gods for explanations, nor would we have diseases, or nor would we have, and we will arrive at a kingdom of God on earth. Or, all things failing, someone will die for us and we will get to heaven.
Yeah.
So it's a very optimistic story. But I think the optimism is based, at least the material part of the optimism is based on colonization. Europe survived not because it had better ideas, or because they had guns, because they had better technology, because they were able to throw dharma into a ditch. You see, it's always easy to make money or to have power if you resort to adharma. And that is what the Dhritarashtra camp is counting on, with Shakuni is plotting. Mahabharata is showing the worst possible pessimistic scenario and still insisting on dharma, which I find absolutely beautiful. It is, we can draw Kunti to the court of judgment and say, did she do the right thing or the wrong thing? We've turned the whole world and humanity into this court of judgment. But you know what? From Mahabharata's perspective, she was a young girl, stressed out. Who could deal with Durvasa? Nobody could deal with Durvasa. Stressed out, young girl. She gets something and she cannot even believe it's true. Right? So, like a Christmas gift, she peeks into it and boom, she ends up with a child. Right? That is called tragic.
Yes.
She's a good person and she didn't probably quite understand what is going on. But by some inexorable law of necessity, like in Greek tragedy, she ends up with a child. She makes a decision, which ultimately she pays the price for. And we all profit because we get this great story. Right? So the tragic is necessary for us because it should elicit in us a kind of a bhava of compassion towards her. But what a great suffering woman she is. And poor thing, yeah, she made it. If she had actually thought it through, again, not only the debate of dharma, but poetry is difficult, If you make everything right in poetry, the twist will be gone. The poetic twist will be gone. So I think it's wonderful that all the characters play the roles assigned by Vyasa in a proper way. So that's why thinking of Mahabharata as literature saves the dharma and the kavya portions much better than if you think of it as history. Therefore, I was extremely pleased or happy to hear Dharani simply give that definition of itihasa and make that nuanced distinction between history and itihasa. Mahabharata may have happened, the war. If it did not happen, it might happen. You never know. But that's not the main question here. The dharma question is the main.
Right. So,
okay, I spoke too much, so I'm going to mute myself.
No, sir, absolutely, but not at all. The next hand that's raised here is Kirtana Balachandran. So, would you like to ask the question?
So, after listening to this enlightening session, I have a short but a brief question.
Mm-hmm.
That is how to approach the Mahabharata and which Mahabharata to actually read.
Okay. Can Dharani take the question? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So, on my part, I think it would be advisable to read the critical edition of Mahabharata And ever since the critical edition of the Mahabharata was completed, practically all Western scholarly work has been focused on it. And many of us here can relate to the first reading or hearing stories of Mahabharata from our grandparents as bedtime stories, which were then followed by oral and visual interpretations of the Mahabharata scenes. And A.K. Ramanujan sir once famously said, "No Hindu reads the Mahabharata for the first time." So when we grow up a little, we read the regional versions. As we grow more older, we read the critical edition. And at last, it's very fewer people amongst all of us who manage to read the original version of Mahabharata, which is in Sanskrit. So those of us who do may notice the trademark on the book or introduction of the book that actually specifies which edition it is, like whether it's the regional one or the fictional one or any other one. But the further study brings us to the realization that each edition has several variations, like in the words, the verses, and in some cases, even the complete episodes. So sometimes it may be that important episodes in one edition may not exist in another, or even if the episode is same, verses are omitted or the order of the words differs. This can be if this can actually affect the narrative continuity, the literary and the philosophical impact of a given incident. So even at first I had the same thought of which version to read or what is the critical edition of Mahabharata and how does it relate to all the manuscripts and dissensions it is based on. So in my journey of exploring it, I got to know that the critical edition is an approximation, like it is the earliest recoverable form of the epic. So this means that the critical edition of the Mahabharata contains all important version of the great epic that have been taken into consideration, and the all important manuscripts collated, estimated, and finally it turned out to be a wholesome edition of Mahabharata. There are even other versions of it, like the regional language editions and all. So most of the classical local languages had their own version written, like they added their views to without disturbing the true essence of the Mahabharata. So it's fine if you read the critical edition or the regional edition. Like critical edition gives us the proper true essence of Mahabharata, and reading the regional editions will get us that author's views and how the small incidents or some episodes that are there in the Mahabharata have been portrayed and what they are trying to let us know. But a small request or advice would be to watch out with the fictional versions of Mahabharata, because I think that those versions actually do not carry the story of it, like the story of the Mahabharata. Not, I wouldn't say that they ruin it, but it's just that those fictional stories are not very related to the truth that is present in Vyasa Mahabharata. So I hope that answers it.
Yes, thank you.
Is there anyone who has a question? I cannot see any more raised hands here. So if anybody has questions.
If you're not interested in the critical edition, then the best one is Kisari Mohan Ganguly's translation, which is not the critical edition. It's the Vulgate. Vulgate is not related to the adjective vulgar. Vulgate simply means belonging to the vulgum or the publicum or the public. So it is the popular version. The beauty of that translation is that the English is spectacular, if a little archaic. And he's also looked at Nilakantha's commentary. So when translating tricky passages, he has taken the help of Nilakantha. So it is a good one. And what is more, it is available for free as PDF online. So Kisari, KMG, Kisari Mohan Ganguly translation. In addition, if you want to buy an edition of physical edition of the book, you may buy the M.N. Dutt volumes. There are 9 volumes from M.N. Dutt from Parimal Publication. This has the advantage of giving you the Sanskrit shlokas with the translation. So if you're looking for a specific shloka, it is easier to find. You're not interested in Sanskrit and you're interested only in the critical edition, you may look for the Mahabharata Chicago translation of the critical edition. There are 3 volumes translated by Van Buitenen. Van Buitenen died, and then Fitzgerald translated 2 more, and then the rest was never translated. So, but the portions translated by Van Buitenen are very good. Those are the main things. And if you are not interested in any of this and you don't know what the Mahabharata is, and you want to start somewhere, like, in the next week, you better get a Cliff's Notes or a Cheater's Note on the whole Mahabharata. I recommend Rajagopalachari's Mahabharata, which is a small book, but it tells you the story without losing the bhava of the story. So those would be the texts I recommend.
And if there are audiences who read in Malayalam, I can suggest that there are free versions available uploaded on shreyas.in, sreyas.in, and on archive.org. I think Vidwan Prakasham and Kunyikutan Tamburan's versions are what we have read. I'm not qualified enough to suggest which is a good version. I can only say which is the versions we have read. And since they are available for free, downloadable, that is what I keep going back to, because, carrying the books around during house shifts and all have become an issue. And I have a talent for losing books. So I have started keeping online versions. Papiya Mitra has a question. I think that should be our last question, because I think we are coming to the end of our time. So Papiya, if you want to ask that question.
It is more a technical question about the translations. That in India, in West Bengal, in Bengali, we had a massive 45-volume translation of Sanskrit Mahabharata collected from many manuscripts by Haridas Siddhanta Bagish. I think he also received a Padma Bhushan in 1960 for his achievement. So if anyone knows about it, can you compare it with the Bori edition? Because we Bengalis rather consider that to be the authoritative translation.
Papiyaji, I would like to answer that question because it is a very important question. Manuscripts have been transmitted through transcribing. We did not have a printing press. So manuscript after manuscript, generation of generation within a custodial tradition had to preserve these texts for us into modernity. Sometimes different schools added a few things and they kept enriching the text. By the way, there are interpolations, but they're not as significant as the Westerners think they are. So what Suptankar has done by comparing all the manuscripts is to create or to excavate a baseline text, which is the ancestor of all manuscripts that have descended. On top of that, he has also made a note of the differences in different manuscripts, and he has listed them all. So if I take the baseline text and I'm looking for either the Sharada or the Malayalam manuscript, I have to take the baseline and make the necessary amendments. Surely this can be done by computer very quickly. And you say print the Malayalam manuscript, it will give you the Malayalam manuscript. So he has done all the background work for organizing all variants. You are right, Papiyaji. We Hindus feel that any little sentence somewhere we like to put it in. When I'm reading the Mahabharata, all the things that occur to me from the Upanishads or Ramayana or Kalidasa, I copy in the margin. We are like that. So what happens sometimes is, as the manuscripts go through generations, the copiers, the scribes would also copy those colophon notes. So those are what are called insertions. At no point was the Mahabharata just a free-floating text that anybody could add anything. So everything in every edition has its meaning. But when Westerners started saying things like there was never a real Mahabharata, that it was always a text in flux, and so on, they pointed to these mixed editions as their evidence, which unfortunately prevented us from understanding that there was such a tradition. V.S. Suptankar has done an extraordinary job of showing that. So now we have the luxury of reading even the Bengali text you have said. And if you want to write a paper or argue a point and you want to know whether that is in the Mahabharata archetype or in which other editions it is, all that you can find out now very easily. So that was just a point for me to talk about how the manuscripts work. And if you, I mean, you and I think that looking at many versions will help the text, but the Westerners will say it corrupts the text because now you don't know which text it is. It is the author's own curation.
Yes, thank you.
So I think we should wind up the questions also because we've passed the time that was allotted to us. So to wind up, before I give the stage back to Dharani, because I believe in giving the last word to the scholar here. But again, my personal thanks to all the attendees and especially to Sir Vishwa Adluri sir for coming here, for sparing your time. And in your chat, you said that this is your joy, but you do not probably understand how much of a Mahabhagya we consider this and the kind of knowledge and joy you impart to us. So if I'm able to convey even a percentage of what I feel now, of how grateful and how thankful I feel to have had this opportunity, I say my deepest namaskaras to you and thank you for joining us today. So Dharani, do you want to take the floor and have winding words? And after Dharani speaks, we will have the prayer, Shanti prayer, and then we will wind up our assembly today.
Yeah, just a couple of words, that's it. So I would firstly like to thank Surat sir and Aishwarya ma'am for being by my side and giving me this opportunity. And also my friend Tarun, who's been helping a lot in this journey of mine. And as you said, I would also like to thank Vishwa sir for making it and sparing so much of time with us here. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
For the prayer, the Shanti mantra, I invite, I'm sorry, I forgot, Ashwati, sorry, I had noted her name and I have forgotten, sorry. Ashwati, please, if you would close our gathering with a prayer and then we can all leave for our duties and dinner and etc.
Sure, ma'am.
Lokaah samastaah sukhino bhavantu. Lokaah samastaah sukhino bhavantu. Lokaah samastaah sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Namah Shivaya.
Namah Shivaya. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.